suicide bombings in Pakistan. 2025 was a deadly year for the country, the worst in a decade. And Pakistan says those responsible are being backed by the Afghan Taliban regime.
They're totally unreliable.
Pakistan and Afghanistan have been fighting, especially at the border. A ceasefire hasn't helped. Pakistan used to have high hopes for its neighbor, Afghanistan. But the Afghan Taliban are now cozying up to Pakistan's arch-rival, India. So could the violence destabilize the entire region? And what's really behind the attacks? Let's start off here, at the Darul Uloom Haqqaniya Madrasa. It's an Islamic religious school. It's sometimes also been called the University of Jihad. It's where many high-ranking Taliban leaders in Afghanistan were educated. So you might think the seminary is in Afghanistan, right? Well, it's not. It's in Pakistan, around 100 kilometers from the border to Afghanistan. The Taliban movement is believed to have emerged from religious seminaries like this one, and more generally from this border region. We need a quick history here. The Soviet Union invaded and occupied Afghanistan in the Cold War. A resistance movement centered on Islam developed.
The Taliban came out of the Mujahideen fighters who were fighting the Soviet occupiers in Afghanistan.
This is Michael Kugelman. He's a senior fellow for South Asia at the Atlantic Council, a US think tank.
I would argue that the Taliban was really a Pakistani project from its early days.
Pakistan, created as a Muslim nation, poured money into what would later become the Taliban. Pakistan's powerful secret service, the ISI, along with Saudi Arabia and the US, wanted to defeat the communists. After the Soviet withdrawal, there were years of civil war in Afghanistan. In 1996, the Taliban movement took over Kabul. By the way, Pakistan was one of just a few countries to recognize the Taliban government at the time. And then there was, of course, the whole thing of the Taliban regime being toppled by a US invasion in 2001 and a long war, which ultimately resulted in the Taliban being back in power 20 years later. And again, Pakistan welcomed Taliban rule. So with such close historic ties and common ground, why have Pakistan and the Afghan Taliban been fighting? To understand, we need to zoom into the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan. The border between the two countries cuts through an area that's traditionally inhabited by Pashtuns, a large ethnic group known for its distinct language and culture. It's a region that has always been interconnected. Trade went across the border. There's even a friendship gate set up at a border crossing.
There are ties, familial ties as well. There are tribal ties as well.
This is Minhas Majid Khan. She's a professor for international relations in Pakistan's Peshawar, right in the border region. And it's not just goods and families that have moved across the border. It's also militants.
Living inside Peshawar, we are living that experience of being targeted by militants or terrorist groups attacking us from across the border, or living amongst us, not knowing that they are amongst us and are engaged in suicide bombing, creating instability.
The area nearby is mountainous, which means it's hard for the Pakistani government to control the border. But Pakistan did try to manage and control the area by setting up border posts like that gate and by building fences, which the Afghan Taliban have reportedly tried to prevent, since they don't even recognize this border. That's because, surprise, surprise, the border was drawn during colonial times by the British Empire in 1893, when today's Pakistan was still part of British India. The border was the brainchild of this guy, Henry Mortimer Durand, a British diplomat. It's still known as the Durand Line, and it was drawn right through the Pashtun region, as you might remember. And Afghanistan has always rejected that.
This is really a colonial-era issue for the Afghans today. The view of the Afghan people today and all Afghan governments is that it was an unfair deal for the Afghans back then. Afghanistan's position has always been that it's illegitimate.
No Afghan government, including the Afghan Taliban, has recognized the border as legitimate, even though it's widely recognized internationally. Pakistan recognizes the border.
The border issue has seeded so much mistrust in the Afghanistan-Pakistan relationship that it really just makes it difficult for the two sides to meet and to, earn each other's trust and be willing to make concessions to get through tension points. And that is because the border issue has always been that fundamental point of strain.
And it's fundamental to the current fighting between Pakistan and the Afghan Taliban regime as well. But it's the other Taliban Pakistan is even more worried about. Hold on. There's another Taliban? Yup, we've been talking about the Afghan Taliban, the ones in charge in Kabul. But there's also a Pakistani Taliban, the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, the TTP. It's usually hard to get current footage of the group. This video was filmed to prove that the TTP's leader survived a Pakistani airstrike on Kabul. The TTP formed in an area near Pakistan's border. The one that's hard to govern. Until 2018, it was also known as the Federally Administered Tribal Areas, or FATA. Today, it's part of a bigger province. But the TTP want the area to be semi-autonomous and under strict Islamic rule. For the TTP, it's what they're fighting for. It's also where most of their operations take place. These are the locations of violent attacks in Pakistan just in 2025. The TTP claimed most of them. Their methods are brutal. One of the deadliest attacks was in 2014 on an army-run school in Peshawar. More than 130 children were killed. And you might know one of the TTP's most prominent targets, Malala Yousafzai, the Pakistani Nobel Peace Prize winner. She survived being shot in the head when she was just 15, after speaking out for girls' education and against the Taliban. A majority of recent TTP attacks has been against the Pakistani military and security personnel.
The government, in a way, is making an effort to clear all the area from all these militants, but still, because of the terrain, it is facing difficulty to crush all these militants.
The TTP wants to wear down the Pakistani state.
Okay, so there are two Taliban movements. The Afghan Taliban in Kabul, who were founded with Pakistani support. And there's a Pakistani Taliban, which is fighting the Pakistani state. And unfortunately for Pakistan, the two Taliban movements have a lot in common.
This relationship between the two Talibans goes way back. They're not the same organization, but they're cut from the same cloth ideologically.
Both want Sharia.
Under the Afghan Taliban, that has meant women are largely excluded from public life, and girls are banned from regular education beyond primary school. several TTP members and commanders started off as foot soldiers for the Afghan Taliban.
So they'd fought together, they'd staged some attacks together in Afghanistan. They'd been really joined at the hip for a long time.
And both groups have benefited from that porous border in the past. When the US launched its so-called War on Terror in Afghanistan in 2001, the Afghan Taliban in power at the time fled over the border to Pakistan. They found refuge in the Fatah area, that tribal border area we talked about. The TTP emerged in the same region. From 2014, a Pakistani military operation tried to push the TTP out of the Fatah area, but the militant group found refuge in Afghanistan, and there's still a strong TTP presence there today.
They are inside Afghanistan, so it is a real security threat for Pakistan.
These are the Afghan provinces with likely TTP training areas. That's right, inside Afghanistan. Pakistan says the TTP are using these areas in Afghanistan to launch attacks on Pakistani soil.
We've seen an upsurge in TTP attacks in Pakistan since the Taliban returned to power.
And Pakistan insists the Afghan Taliban are harboring and even financing the TTP. But the Afghan Taliban deny this. Pakistan had hoped the Afghan Taliban would help counter that security threat when they retook Kabul in 2021. Now the Pakistani government's initial enthusiasm for the regime in Kabul has dried up.
लेकिन now when I look back, I think मैं गलत था और जो उन्होंने पिछले 3 साल में पाकिस्तान के साथ जिस तरह उन्होंने डील किया है तो they're totally unreliable.
Pakistan thought that the Taliban would continue to partner and be willing to help Pakistan address its concerns because they had worked together for so long. But in fact, that was not the case.
You might remember these pictures from 2021. Afghans trying to flee the country amidst the sudden withdrawal of US and NATO troops and the takeover by the Taliban.
The TTP saw that as inspiring, even though that's not something they could do in Pakistan, but it's one reason why we've seen an upsurge in TTP attacks in Pakistan since the Taliban returned to power.
ये जो है अफगानिस्तान के साथ जो हमारी मोहब्बत का जो है शाखसाना है और उसकी कीमत आज भी अदा कर रहे हैं हम.
So Pakistan feels betrayed by the Afghan Taliban.
The Taliban no longer needed Pakistan's help. It wasn't fighting a war anymore, so it didn't need a sanctuary in Pakistan. It didn't need other forms of support. And in that sense, Pakistan lost leverage over the Taliban.
But there's another twist to this story, because it seems like the Afghan Taliban has moved on. Afghanistan is turning towards India, Pakistan's biggest adversary in the region. Remember this guy, the Afghan Taliban foreign minister who studied at the so-called University of Jihad in Pakistan? This pop star welcome was part of his first official visit to India. Here he is visiting an Islamic seminary in Deoband. Yup, the leader of an Islamist regime visiting India, which has a Hindu nationalist government.
I do think that India also seizes an opportunity. It sees that Pakistan's relationship with the Taliban is falling apart, and India wants to capitalize on that. Afghanistan is a battleground for India-Pakistan competition, and India wants to get an upper hand here.
So it is, in a way, disadvantage for Pakistan to for India having good relations with Afghanistan, because then it has to focus on both eastern and western border, because India and Pakistan are rival states and have fought many wars. Even recently, we had clashes.
To the east, the conflict with rival India escalated again over this disputed region. This leaves Pakistan squeezed from all sides, because in the west, Pakistan is now also clashing with the Afghan Taliban. And internally, Pakistan is being attacked by the Pakistani Taliban, the TTP. And it's not just Pakistanis that are being targeted. This suicide attack was allegedly carried out by the TTP. It killed 5 Chinese engineers that were working at a major dam construction site in Pakistan's north.
China, I would argue, has a lot of skin in the game in this crisis, and its investments have been targeted. Chinese workers have been targeted and killed in some cases in Pakistan.
China has huge infrastructure projects in Pakistan and wants to invest more in Afghanistan. It's looking to strengthen ties with both countries.
But it's hard to do that if you have this very potentially destabilizing crisis between Afghanistan and Pakistan.
This meeting took place before the border clashes had escalated. To make sure things don't get even worse, some leading Muslim countries have been trying to prevent an all-out war between the Afghan Taliban and Pakistan. But a series of peace talks have not reached a permanent agreement. One of the main sticking points in negotiations, the border. That is once again proving divisive.